Thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Paulsen, the Chief Operating Officer. And one thing Dr. Elder said in that last panel, I wrote down, we can do better. We want to do better. Are we ready to end Alzheimer's? A lot of hurdles that we identified, but we can do better. We want to do better. We heard in the end panel about culture and about stigma. We heard about conversations that need to happen in families, conversations that need to happen with doctors. There's a lot more than we need more and better medicine that goes into ending Alzheimer's. It is extremely unlikely that we will have the equivalent of penicillin or some sort of silver bullet for this disease. We're going to all have to do a lot of different things. More drugs are needed for sure. And we heard about that yesterday in our first panel about how drug developers are gaining insights, but they've got to get the population right. They've got to get the target right. They've got to get the dosing right. They got to get the general hypothesis of how this is supposed to work right. That's a lot of things to try to get right. They have to understand the genetics, but there's hope there because we are understanding more about the genetics. We heard about that on the technology panel today. We heard on the technology panel today how there are genetically identified 243 subtypes of Alzheimer's disease. 243 subtypes, 20,000 proteins in the human body, but they now have identified all these subtypes, have identified the proteins. They can model the proteins. That helps with all of the different things that they need to do to develop drugs. And the system is just moving along quickly. But as we heard on the second panel yesterday, and we heard from the Surgeons General and pretty much everybody who talked on this panel, on this summit, it'd be so much better to prevent rather than to need a drug in the first place. And we think about the body as a whole system, even though we do have genetic predispositions. Genetic predisposition rarely is the whole end of story. Most often there are things that one can do to reduce the risk, even with the genetic predisposition. And we heard about that in the panel yesterday. We heard Dr. Elders talking about that, Dr. Satcher talking about that, things that we can do today. And there are things that we need the federal government to do to make that happen. The goal to prevent Alzheimer's should become part of the National Alzheimer's Plan. Right now, the plan is primarily, although it says prevention, it is primarily focused on the treatment. We now know that there are things that can be done early in life, but also at midlife to prevent this disease. And the government needs to take a stand on that. We need to remind people Alzheimer's is not an inevitable part of growing old. Alzheimer's is a disease. As Dr. Phila talked about today, there are pathological hallmarks, things that happen in your brain, just like there are things that happen in your arteries that define heart disease. And it's not something we just have to tolerate. Government needs to take a part of that and say, let's detect it early and let's prevent it. We have to do better. We can do better. There are hurdles for sure. We're some of the hurdles. The medical system is some of the hurdles. Being behind and even mentioning Alzheimer's as a possible diagnosis compared to what other diseases are is a hurdle. But we heard today that there is progress, that we are leapfrogging where other diseases have been because of what we've learned and what we're still learning through the study, for example, for the All of Us study. And the All of Us study shows something really clearly. You heard Dr. Wilkins say it's 340,000 people in there right now, and more than half of those people in that study are from historically marginalized communities. When we look at a lot of trials in Alzheimer's disease, we see single-digit percentages of people from minority communities. All of Us has proven that we can do it. I'm reminded of what Dolores Huerta said yesterday. there are things that we think are impossible. It turns out they're not impossible. We just have to have the will and push our elected leaders to make it happen. So coming out of this summit, know that we're not quite ready to end Alzheimer's yet, but the biology, the physiology, the medicine is moving fast. The genetics, all of that stuff is moving fast, but there's going to be a whole system that needs to be in place for when that part of the scientific enterprise makes the next leap forward. Systems of delivering drugs, of making sure that those drugs work for all people. There's also a whole system that can happen without drugs, a system of making sure that people know that there are things that they can do to reduce their risk of Alzheimer's disease. Because even with a silver bullet drug, wouldn't it be better to not get the disease in the first place? We can do better. We have to do better. I hope in hearing our summit over the past 2 days, you've heard something that is meaningful to you. We at Us Against Alzheimer's can do better and want to do better too. And we could use your support at usagainstalzheimers.org/contribute. That's usagainstalzheimers.org/contribute. If you found something useful in what you've heard at our summit, if you've been inspired to try to help us do better, please consider making a gift. We'll put it to very good use here. Thanks for joining us. If we can help you in any way, send us a note through our website, and we look forward to seeing you again online or maybe even in person, the Us Against Alzheimer's Summit in 2022. Thank you.